Okay. Hello, everyone. Oh, let's see if everything's going good here. Hey, everybody. Can you guys hear me? Give me a thumbs up or a yay or a high five or something in the chat if you guys can hear me clearly. Everything looks good. Video, audio, all of that good stuff. Wow, chat's blowing up. How is everybody doing today? Yes, I like the fists. The fists are coming down. Y'all know what this means, right? Jordan from Jamaica. What's going on, brother? Where in Jamaica you from? So I'm just waiting a few minutes to get folks jumping on. Get folks jumping on. I decided that, instead of doing a YouTube upload post, my weekly regular post, to just jump on live to just check in with how all you are doing, because that's we got to check in with each other from time to time, especially in these trying times, man. There's so many stuff happening right now. COVID-19, social injustice, with the riots and the protests and the police, and not to mention everything that's going on with, this is an election year in the United States, so everybody's losing their mind right now. So, what we're going to try to do is to just keep things light, keep it music, and just continue to do what we do with the praise, because at the end of the day, that's all we can do. What's going on, Jackson? Elise, that's how I got it, from the Togo. Kenya. Jeff from Kenya. We got Jean. Jean, where you from? Jean Lewis. Oh, Jordan, you're from Kingston. We're in Kingston. I lived in Kingston from 2004 to 2009. I lived in Kingston because, that's where I studied. Went to the Edmund College for music. Yeah, man. Keys Generation says, we pray that things calm down. I'm hoping things calm down, man. One of my biggest struggles is that I haven't been able to go to church. Since the COVID hits in March, church has been locked down, and we've been doing this virtual thing. And, we do what we can, but I am so... what's going on? This is camera. Anyways, we'll make it work. Haven't been able to worship in the sanctuary, man. I haven't played in church since February, and so that's tough. Gerald from Palm Beach, Florida. Gerald, we're gonna be neighbors soon. Well, state buddies, so to speak. Floridians. Moving to Florida in by about September. I should be living in Florida. I'll be in Jacksonville. So all my Jacksonville folks, if you're online, when I move to Jacksonville, I'm gonna need some new community of people to hang with. So be sure to hit me up. September, I'll be moving to Jacksonville. That's where I'll be living. Neil from South Wales. Awesome. Oh, St. Catherine. Yeah, you're from across the pond, man. St. Catherine. But, you know, that's, you know, Kingston. It's close enough. So Ron is saying, Warren, could you do this week by Anthony Brown? Well, you know, Ron, I don't know that song. It's something I'll definitely have to go check out. Sebastian from India. What time now is it in India? We got Danny from Indonesia. All right, so we got 97 folks online now. I can't give everyone a shout out. Simon from Kuwait, Dennis from Kenya. Can't give everyone a shout out, but glad you guys are here. So B Major from Music says, check out Hopewell in Jacksonville. I was MD there before I moved to North Carolina. I'll definitely have to check that out. Definitely have to check out because I'm going to need a new church. You know, I'm going to need a new spot to hang out and probably play. I'll probably just sit in the congregation whenever church does open back up. I'll probably just hang out in the congregation for like a good 6 months, just, you know, taking in the vibe, learning the culture of the church before I try to step foot up and offer my services in the music department. All right, so as you guys see today, the topic of discussion is just going to be a straight up Q&A. I don't have any particular lecture plan. I just wanted to jump on, hang out with you guys, and just see if I can answer a lot of your questions. Because a lot of you guys sent me emails and messages asking a lot of questions, and some of those questions are just a little bit too complex to explain through an email or a Facebook message. So I said, let me jump on today and try to see how much of these questions I can get through. I might not get through all of them, but I'll definitely try to get through as many of them as I can. So let's have some housekeeping rules before I get started. The first one is, if you have a question, try to preface that question with the word question in bold. That's so when I'm eyeing the chat, I can quickly see where the questions are from just the standard comments, right? Because I don't want to have to spend too much time scrolling to find where the questions are. So write big and bold question before you start your question. So that's the housekeeping number one. Housekeeping number two, try to make your questions as clear and as concise as possible. So don't give me a paragraph to read before I find a question. Just try to get to the point, boom, 1 or 2 sentences as clear as possible so I can jump into it and give you some solutions. Try to make your questions, housekeeping number 3, try to make your questions as practical as possible. So something that I can easily explain or demonstrate right here, because I have my keyboard and everything. So something that I can easily show you, demonstrate, or explain to you. So those are the 3 housekeeping rules, and I'll probably have to repeat these rules when more people jump on. All right, so let's go. Questions. So I see the first one from Jaxie, and he says, is there an easy familiar formula, for playing runs? Is there an easy formula for playing runs? I'll say, okay, let me see if I can condense that for you, Jaxie. First one is, playing runs requires you to have a very clear understanding of 2 things, chords and scales. Because when we're playing runs, we're basically improvising little melodic lines, right? And so the 2 things that we rely on to create those lines, runs, and licks are the harmony, means the chords, or the scale. So if I'm in the key of C and I'm doing a 1, 6, 2, 5. Then I can do so all I'm thinking about is the chord that I'm on or the chord that I'm going to. And then I'm thinking about what key I'm in. I'm in the key of C, so mainly wide keys, right? Now when we take it to a step further beyond that, then I can start introducing passing tones, which are like chromatic notes. So I can do, then, I can start using little chromatic notes, and I call those passing tones because they're usually going from one chord tone or scale tone, passing to a non-chord tone or scale tone, and then resolving to a chord tone or scale tone. So that's the sort of rough in-the-box concept. When you're thinking about runs, those are the things you want to thinking about. You want to be thinking about the key you're in, the chord progressions, and then using notes from the key. And then to take it a step further to make it sound a little bit more intermediate and advanced, you can start experimenting with passing tones, chromatic tones that are not in the key or in the chord. But those chromatic tones need to resolve to a chord tone or scale tone so it sounds nicely. And then a sort of fourth step from that is you can start experiment with the rhythms, you know? So you don't have to play everything sort of straight and on the beat. Start explore with the rhythms. There are a lot of different possibilities of rhythms. So in a nutshell, that's the formula. That's the things you need. Those are the things you need to be thinking about when creating licks, lines, and runs. Thank you, Davin, for the $200. Is that a super chat? What is this? Is that a $200 super chat? Thank you, my brother. Thank you very much. Very much appreciate it, man. All right. Let me see what other questions we have. So we have a question from a share Prince that says, how do you play without thinking irrespective to the track? How do you play without thinking irrespective to the track? So I'm going to ask a question here, Prince. Which track are you referring to? Because I'm not really sure what track you're referring to. So yeah, clarify that question and we can get back to that. So Luhani says Rhodes sound or piano sound. I don't know if that was a question or a statement, but if it was a question, it depends. Rhodes work great for certain style of music, certain tempo of music. It all depends on the style. And piano definitely works for majority of everything you can do. And so it's one of those things that vary. Questions from Carlos. He says, if you had to explain to us in one sentence, what's the best characteristics a gospel musician can have? So Carl's asking, one sentence, what's the best characteristic a gospel musician can have or should have? Your ear. Gospel musicians need very good ear. So if you want to be an aspired gospel musician, that's the number one thing I would say to start working on. Your ear. Because the better your ears are, the easier for you to think quicker on the spot. Also, the better your ears are, the easier you can recognize chords, keys, voicings, passing chords. All of those things become a little bit easier the better your ear is. So while I'm a stickler for technique isn't the most important thing. While I'm a stickler for theory isn't the most important thing. The most important thing for a gospel musician is to be able to hear. because I've come across guys who can play very well, but they don't really know what they're playing. So they can hear that this chord sounds good here, that chord sounds good here. They can't really explain to you why it sounds good, but because their ear is developed and experienced enough, they've done a lot of listening, they know that it sounds good, they just can't tell you why. And at the end of the day, as a gospel musician, that's what you need to be able to do. You just need to be able to play stuff. Even if you can't quite explain why it sounds good or why it works yet, doesn't matter. You just need to be able to play. And then obviously, as you get better, it's important to go back and start to learn the why. But when you're up there playing, nobody's going to be asking you the why. They're just going to say, the brother sounds good on keys. So that's what I would say, Carlos. Your ear is your greatest asset as a gospel musician. Denver says, Mr. Warren, I am a musician with a great ear. If you teach a chord, I can tell you the name of every note in it. However, one problem though, I can only play in C and I use transpose. Any tips? Well, you guys know that I've done quite a few videos in the past 3 weeks. A lot of discussions about transpose button. Denver, the best thing you can do is you have to start, one, practicing isolated progressions in all keys. I have multiple courses from beginner to advanced that teaches different chord progressions, different voicing in all 12 keys. So we call that isolated progressions because they're not really based on any songs, but they're based off popular progressions you find in songs. That's the first thing. Tip number 2 is you have to start learning songs in their original key. So if you pull up a song that you're going to be learning and it's in the key of F, don't transpose the keyboard to F to learn the song, or transpose it to C to learn the song. Try to learn the chords and figure out the chords and figure out the licks and everything you need for that song in the key that it was recorded in. By doing this, learning the songs in the original key, over time, you'll realize that you start to get more proficient in the keys. Because the thing is, every chord and progressions and licks and line you have learned in C, while those things are a little bit different in each key, you're going to realize that it's not going to take you as long as you think to be able to sort of translate that knowledge into new keys. But it has to be a deliberate and consistent effort. It's not something that you're just going to wake up one morning and be like, ooh, I can play in the other keys. No, you got to make a deliberate and consistent effort to start tackle one key at a time, one key at a time. Remember, there's only 12 keys. And so if you just spend a month in each key, in a year, you would have gone through all 12 keys. And then this whole key phobia thing is a distant memory. All right? So that's what I would say, Denver. Jeff says, when do I use flat 6 chords and flat 3 chords? So when you say, when do you use these things? It's a tricky question because you first have to ask yourself, does the song require a flat 6 chord or a flat 3 chord? And that's a big concept for a lot of people. They say, when do I use a flat 9th? When do I use a 13 chord? When? But flip the question around and ask, is it required? Would the song sound good with this chord? Because if it doesn't sound good, then you don't use it. So it's one of those questions, Jeff, where it varies based on different songs, you know? So without a context, I can't tell you when to use a flat 6 or a flat 3 because those are most likely chromatic median chords, or those chords are borrowed from the parallel minor key. So it's not one of those chords that I use a lot, even as a passing chords, because of their functions. They're directly lifted from the parallel minor keys and they create a chromatic median relationship, right? I know I'm getting a little bit technical here, but that's why this question doesn't have a blanket answer. It's going to be based on specific songs. And it's all depends on what effect you're trying to create by introducing these chords, because they're non-diatonic chords and because of their strategic chromatic mediant relationship, they have to be used in strategic ways. The most popular way I can think about right now is to use them in the form as a tritone substitution. So if I'm in the key of C, the flat 3 would be E flat. The flat 6 would be A flat. So if I'm doing a 1, 6, 2, 5, I can use, when I go to the 6, I can use a tritone substitution of 6, which is that E flat, the flat 3 of the key of C, to take me to D. So I can be like, now also, when I go to the 2, I can use a tritone substitution for the 2, which is the A flat, which takes me to G. And so now we get this crazy progression. So it's not a very simple concept. And like I said, without a context of a song, I wouldn't even know how to use these. Because every decision I make as it relates to reharmonization, substitution, it's usually in the context of a song. Because the song's going to determine what voicing I use, what quality of the chords I use, and so on. Great question. Question from Sebastian. He says, I have sloppy fingers and can't play in timing in spite of practice with metronome. How to improve? So let's take that into two-step process. Sloppy fingers, which meaning you're lacking technique. Technique, to improve technique and dexterity. And when we talk about dexterity, we're talking about the strength of your fingers, these muscles, the dexterous fingers. Those things can only be solved through technique development. Scales. Well, first of all, if you don't have access to a piano or a weighted keyboard, that would be the first step. Because if all you're practicing on is light keys, then it's hard to really build dexterity on those things, from those type of keys. So try to practice on weighted keys. But scales, arpeggios, broken chords, blocked chords, all of those things are technique building, and they need to be a part of your regular practice sessions. Before you start work on any songs, spend 5 to 10 minutes working on technique. When you're working on technique, you have to be very meticulous. So you don't go and start to try to practice scales fast. No, you practice them slowly, steadily, and evenly all the time to a metronome or a drum beat. Building technique is a long game. It's not something that you can solve in a week or 2 or 3. It has to be a lifestyle thing, building technique. And these exercises are the best exercise I've come across for building dexterity and technique. A lot of people use Hanon. You can use Hanon too. I'm not really a fan of Hanon. But that's how you get rid of sloppy fingers. What was the other part of your question? You can't play timing. Timing is one of those things where some people are born naturally better at timing than others. That doesn't mean if your timing is not as great, that doesn't mean you can't develop timing. It just means you have to work on it a little bit harder. I find the best way to building time, practice to an actual drum beat. Get drum patterns and practice chord progressions. When you're learning your songs, once you get the songs to a point where you can play very well, start to play the song to the actual recording. Play along to the recording, and that will force you to keep timing. Do this over the course of weeks, months, and years, and I guarantee you, your technique will improve and your timing will improve. Question from Abutu Francis. He says, how can I apply my blues scales in songs? So blues scales generally give the songs a bluesy sound. So that's the first question you want to ask yourself. Is this song a bluesy type song that requires the use of a blues scale? Because if you're playing something more rock style, something more CCM, you probably don't want to go straight blues scale. It's going to sound weird. So you want to make sure that you're applying the blues scale to songs that requires a bluesy sound. Now, outside of that, you want to start to sit and build and practice little blues licks in line. And so on. So a lot of the blues licks are things that I just kind of sit and I just practice little blues licks over time, right? You know, if you're also into a lot of blues, start listening to old blues pianists to hear some of the licks that they use and start to learn some of those. Sit and learn those licks, incorporate them in your playing. You know, we call that shedding, building a nice toolbox of little licks online based on the blues scale. So that's the best way to sort of approach it. Question from Elise. It says, how are the way to end gospel songs? Rephrase that. How are some ways to end the gospel songs? This is another question that is based on style. Gospel is still a pretty big, broad genre and term, because within gospel, there are a lot of different style of gospel. And some endings are unique. Like, for example, if it's a more old school, you know, let me just quickly pull up something. Everybody knows Amazing Grace. In grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see. So a lot of those old school songs, they go to the 4. I was blind, but now I see. And what I did there, I just go to the 4, then I go to the 3, or the 1 in first inversion, then I go to the flat 3, then I go to the 2, then I go to the 5, then to the 1. So that's a typical sort of old school ending. It varies. What if you're doing something more modern, like as the deer panted for the waters, oh my soul longed after thee. You alone are my heart's desire, and I long to worship thee. You can do it. And in this case, I went to the 4, then the flat 6, Then I just drop back to the 2, then to the 5, then back to the 1, but sort of like a sharp 11. So these are definitely more advanced ending, but you know, it varies. There's so many things you can do when it comes to ending songs, because there's no melody being sung. You can go all over the place. You just need to know how to get back to end on the 1 chord. So that's just some ideas you can play around with. We have a question from, I don't know how to pronounce this name, Luvani. Let me know if I pronounced that correctly. Thank you. It says, piano or Rhodes, why? Play something using both sounds. So I'm not able to switch sounds right now because my VST is set to addictive keys, but I don't really approach them that differently. There isn't much difference in the approach to playing Rhodes versus piano. What is done differently is the style, depending on the style of song you're using. You know, because if I'm using a funky Rhodes, then the approach is going to be a little bit different than I probably do for a piano. But I would say 95% of the approach is still the same for playing Rhodes or piano. Question from Joyce says, can you identify if the questions are from beginners, advanced, or professional players, please? I don't know. I'm going to say there are really no professional players here. You know, if someone reached the professional level, they probably know everything I know already. So, but you can tell basically the context of the question. You can tell if it's coming from a beginner or a intermediate. You know, like if someone's asking about how to use a 7th chord, then you know that's more likely a beginner or early intermediate player. So a question from Music Hangout with Kelvin says, please explain to me how I can play gospel music using the jazz standards of style. The jazz standards. So what do you mean by the jazz standard? I'm not sure what you mean by the jazz standard. Explain that for me. Question from Samuel. He says, is it possible for me to add a minor chord to a major progression as passing? Yes. One of the passing chords I discuss in my course, the gospel passing chords in C, is what we call a minor chromatic passing. And generally we use that whenever we're going to a minor chord. So if I'm going to a minor chord, I can use the minor chromatic passing to get to that minor chord. And the minor chromatic passing is usually a half step above the destination chord. So again, I'm going to take the basic 1, 6, 2, 5 in the key of C. 1, 6, 2, 5. I can do 1, 6, 2, 5. 1, 6, 2, 5. So all I'm doing, before I get to the 6, I can approach it with a B minor 7, a B flat minor 7, which goes down to A minor 7. Before I get to D, I can approach it with a E flat minor 7, that goes down to B minor, D minor, and then that goes to my G. You know, so. So that's a cool way you can use the minor chords. Let's see. Question from Samuel. He says, is it possible for me to add a... Okay, I answered that one already. Wait, so someone says they can't hear me speak while playing the piano. Is that true for everybody? Because I'm seeing that both audio and everything coming through nicely here, so not sure why you wouldn't be able to hear me. Let me know if other people are experiencing this also. Maybe you got to turn up your volume. Question from Christina says, how can I go from playing slow gospel songs to moving upbeat gospel songs? So the approach to playing slow songs and fast songs is a little different. The first difference is that technically you have to be able to move faster on the piano. You know, so if you're going from to going from so you have to be able to move the chords faster. The second thing I'm doing, I'm using a lot less sustain pedal, and I'm playing my chords more what we call jabs, staccato. Like if I'm doing, have my mind made up, and I won't turn back, 'cause I want to see my Jesus someday. I got my mind made up, and I won't turn back, 'cause I want to see my Jesus someday. So you see, I'm doing a lot more jabs. I mean, playing a song like this solo piano is a little harder because you generally have to sort of start to get the bass line going while using the right hand. So if you're practicing fast song, try to see if you can practice it to a nice, you know, clap track or a drum beat that's already going fast. And then just start to try practicing your jabs between the chords, right? Again, I have a few courses on the website that teaches the different style I used when I'm breaking down these faster songs. And then start with a medium tempo and then gradually work your way up to the more faster tempo so you can increase the tempo over time, right? Because the licks and little stuff we do when we're playing faster songs, you want to be able to use those at a slower tempo first before you start to increase it. But it's one of those things where you got to start slow, get used to the style. It's a different style. It's a more jab technique, right? And just learn the little slides and stuff, and then gradually increase that tempo over time. Question? So a question from a, wait, what just happened right here? Okay, so let me just go back down. Somebody posted something that threw off the chat. I don't even know where I was. Let me see if I can scroll back down. Oh, why did that happen? Okay, all right, I think I'm back. Wait, nope, I'm not back. This chat just scrolled all the way down. All right, let me see. I lost my spot in the chat. I'm scrolling back up because I want to make sure I don't miss anyone's question. Okay, I think I think I'm there now. I think I'm there. So Abel says, what concept you use when you reharm a song. One more question, how do you obtain bebop sound? So let me start with the second question. I don't play bebop, so unfortunately I can't answer you there. I don't know anything about bebop. It's not something I studied, not something, to be honest, I'm particularly interested in. It's just not my style of jazz, way too fast for my taste. So I can't help it with bebop. As it relates to reharm, how do you reharm a song? Well, first thing is you need to be get very comfortable with extensions. A lot of reharms tend to use extensions, 7ths, 9ths, 11ths, 13ths, and the altered extensions. Now I'm talking about more advanced reharms. So get clear on how to build these chords, understand the theory behind them, learn a few voicing of these chords, and then from there start to study the concepts of passing chords. A lot of the times the reharmonization involves the use of passing chords and substitution. So when we talk about like tritone substitution, a lot of the times you can use chromatic medians as a form of substitution. And sometimes the reharm often involves pulling chords from the parallel minor. So if I'm playing in the key of C, I can go to the key of C minor, and I can pull some chord from there to use in C major. So one of the standard use of this is, instead of going to a D minor, if I'm playing a 2-5-1, sometimes they can do. So instead of making the D a minor, they made it into a diminished, half diminished 7, which is the 2 chord in the parallel minor. So it's a borrowed chord that takes you to the 5. Now, when you're using borrowed chords and that stuff, you have to pay very important attention to the melody to make sure that you're not altering the melody note. And so that's one thing to keep in mind when you're doing substitutions, reharmonizations, passing chords. Keep track of the melody. So those are just things you want to be working on, thinking about when reharming songs. And then from there, it's just a matter of, does it sound good to my ear? And run with it from there. Ba da da dee dee da da. Question from TX channel says, I want to ask if it's compulsory for urban professional pianists to know how to read music. Let's just remove the word urban pianists, professionals, and say professional pianist. If you want to be a professional pianist, learning how to read music isn't compulsory, but it's advisable. Knowing how to read music is going to open up other avenues and outlets for you as a professional musician. Because, you know, when we're talking about professional musicians, you're going to be working with a lot of singers who might want orchestration. You know, they might say, for example, they might come to you with a score of a piano part and say, I would like to work with this for a song. Can you reproduce it for me? Or can you add some additional chords to it? You know, if you're playing in an ensemble, a professional ensemble that probably involves a choir, an orchestra, a band, and all that stuff, most of that stuff is probably going to be scored. And so just learning how to read is going to open up a lot of avenues for you to get work. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the jobs I do now doesn't really require me to read. That's because I don't gig as much as I used to. I spend most of my time online creating tutorials, you know. So that's majority of my job right now, where my income comes from. But if you want to be a full-fledged gigging musician working with professional artists, learning how to read is going to help you. So you don't find yourself in situations where, you know, you're being paid big money to do a gig, but someone hands you a score and you don't know how to make heads or tail of it. So if you want to be a professional musician that works with multiple people, not being able to read is going to create some limitations for you. Okay. So a question from Sebastian. He says, how to start playing jazz piano, how to get good in dynamics, jazz standards, comping. So Sebastian, first question I have for you is, how much listening do you do? A huge part of playing not only jazz really, but any style, genre of music, you have to start to embed the sound in your fiber. You know, you have to start listening to a lot of that music. So if you want to play jazz music, you should be putting in 1 to 2 to 3 hours of listening a week, minimum. Because you need to start to incorporate what we call the language. And the only way to develop that language, that sound, is just to start listening to a whole bunch of it. So that's the first step. You just got to start listening constantly. The second step is you have to start learning some theory. Learning about chords, because jazz music doesn't use triads, 7th chords and above. So you have to start learning some chords, learning 7ths, 9ths, 13ths, all of that stuff. You got to learn how to play in all 12 keys, got to learn all your scales. At least start with the minor scales, the major scales, the blues scales, the pentatonic scales. And then the fourth step after that, you just got to start learning some jazz standards. Start to learn the songs so you can learn the progressions and stuff. And that, along with a lot of listening, you'll start to get into the soul of jazz. You'll start to get that sound. You'll start to understand a little by little what's going on in the music. But it's one of those things you got to submerge, you know, your entire life in, just everything jazz. Same thing goes for gospel. So question asked how to use the minor chromatic passing chord. So I explained that about 10 minutes ago in the video. So what I would say is, after this live stream is completed, just go back and watch this video and you'll see me demonstrating the minor chromatic passing. And let me see. A question from Fuller says, is it logical to practice the same song in all 12 keys, or does practicing it in 3 to 4 keys have the same result? I would say neither. The only time I transpose a song to another key is if the singer or the congregation or the choir needs it to be sung in another key. Then I'll go learn it in the next key. There's so many songs out there. There are hundreds of thousands of songs right now. You don't need to take the same song, transposing it into all 12 keys if you're trying to learn all 12 keys. It's better you find 12 different songs in each key. That's a better way to approach it than to take the same. Because the thing is, when you take one song and you spend 3 months trying to move it through all 12 keys, that's 3 months that you could have learned 12 different songs. You know, so I would say, that, you know, it goes back to my statement earlier, try to learn songs in the original key. So if you're working on a song right now and it's in the key of C, once you finish that song, find another song. That other song might be in the key of G. Do that. Then find another song. If the other song is in the key of G, skip it. Go to another song. You know what I mean? Force yourself to start learning multiple songs, because there are few things that happens when you learn multiple songs, constantly learning songs. The obvious one is you're learning how to play in different keys. The second thing is you're learning different chord voicings, because the song is different, so most likely the chord voicings are going to be different. You're learning different tempo, you're learning different styles, you're building your repertoire collection, the amount of songs you know. And so by constantly learning new songs, you're building a lot of skills that is necessary. You're developing your ear. You're getting to understand different style. So I would say don't take the same songs, moving it through all 12 keys. That's sort of redundant, waste of time. Might as well find 12 different keys, 12 different songs, and work on that. You'll get a lot more benefit from doing that opposed to taking the same songs, moving it to all 12 keys. Denny says, Denny says, can you share books about gospel and jazz with scale techniques for free? The best book for scales for contemporary music like jazz is a book called The Source. Don't remember the author, and I'm looking around my room now to see if I see the book. I think I see the book. Hold on a sec. All right, I am back. Hopefully you guys can hear me. So this is the book I'm talking about. It's called The Source, and it's by Steve Barta. This is the best book I've come across for learning all the contemporary jazz scales. You know, it covers all the modes. It covers, so it covers all the, like the Lydian flat 7, super Locrian, the chromatic scale, Locrian sharp 2, Lydian flat 7, Lydian augmented minor scale, harmonic minor scale, pentatonic scale, blues scale, augmented scale, whole tone scale, the diminished scales, and then all the modes. And it also tells you what chords these modes work with. You know, like for example, it's telling you that right here, it's telling you that the major pentatonic scale can be played over a major 6 chord, a major 6/9 chord, major 7 flat 5, major 9, dominant 7th chord, dominant 9th, dominant 9 flat 5, 11th chord, 13th sus chord. I mean, you know, it's an insane book. There was another book on jazz. I can't remember it, and I don't think I have it here. But this is a great book for scales. So for anybody who wants to get serious about jazz or even gospel, that's a must-have book right there. Okay. So a romanticist says, how to harmonize a melody? Super easy, please. So first thing you have to know that a melody, every melody is made up of 2 types of tones, chordal tones and non-chordal tones. Remember that chords harmonize melody. And so if the melody is not a chord tone, it's going to be a non-chord tone. And it's usually a non-chord tone resolving to a chord tone. Let's just take a basic Amazing Grace. So those first 2 notes of the melody are chord tones. But then it goes, oh, look at that, chord tone again. So these 3 notes belong to the 1 chord. Then it goes non-chord tone going to a chord tone. Chord tone, chord tone, chord tone, chord tone, chord tone, non-chord tone, chord tone. And so that's the basic step. You have to understand chord tone versus non-chord tone. So how do you decide which tone is a chord tone and a non-chord tone? Well, it's helpful to have the chords first. You know, if we're talking about writing an entirely new melody, now that's a whole different thing, requires a whole different sort of session. But if you're trying to harmonize a melody of an existing song, try to get the chords first. Understand the chord makeup, and then start to put the melody. Now, as it relates to how you play the chords with the melody in a nice way, now there are different levels and techniques to that. And I have a tutorial right here on YouTube, how to play chords with melody. So you just type that in your search bar, YouTube, how to play chords with melody, Warren. You will see that video comes up. And I shared some very important tips on what to think about when doing that nice broken style chords with melody. Okay. So Gene says we need tutorials about ragtime. A little bit outside the scope of what I do. You know, ragtime, I do straight up gospel, not ragtime. So questions from Ronnie says, can you tell me how to play some good chords for gospel songs? Again, that's too broad of a questions. Remember that every song has specific chords. So good chords for gospel song is implying that you could just take any random chord and use it anywhere in the songs. Nope. Everything it has an order to it, a structure, and there are rules. So without a context, I can't just say, give you chords, because hey, that's a chord right there. It's a C13. Here's another chord. There's an augmented ninth right there. Here's a chord right here too. You know, so these are chords, but they need specific context. Outside the context of a song, they're just a chord. And you can't use these chords in every song. Things need a concept. It's like if I say to you, did you do it? Did I do what? Did you do it? Did I do what? Before you can understand the question, did you do it? You first need to understand the context of what I'm talking about. Now, the same thing applies to music. When you say give you chords for gospel song, which gospel song? You know what I mean? It needs a context, very specific context. So guys, I'm getting super hot right now because I have like 17 blaring lights on me. So I'm going to turn on my AC, which means you'll hear a little motor in the background. Hopefully it's not too disturbing, but I'm burning up right now. Middle of summer. Turn on my AC. Okay, AC. So hopefully that's not too loud for you guys, because the AC is just right there. All right, you see, question from Anthony Nelson. He says, how do you use minor chords as passing chords? This is another question that I answered previously. So Anthony, I know it's a little bit of an inconvenience, but once the stream is over, I would say rewatch the stream, and then you will see where I explain clearly how to use the minor chromatic passing chord. So a question that says, are there certain chords you can play in any worship song? Again, it's too broad of a question for me to be able to give you an answer. Certain chords, I don't know, you know, are we talking about CCM? Are we talking about gospel? What kind of gospel? The only thing I can think about that has a more specific structure is like old school praise and worship, up-tempo songs. That's when you have specific chords, you know, stuff like. Those are sort of specific. They work on 90% of old school gospel song, you know. The 1 in first inversion, the 4 in first inversion, the 4 in root position, then the sharp 4, then the 5, in the bass, one chord in the right hand, then resolve to one. That happens in so many fast songs. I'm one, let me see. Revival in my soul. Want a revival in my soul. Must abide to the blood of Jesus. I want a revival in my soul. Right there, you see? So whenever you're doing all those sort of old school gospel songs, that's what we call a turnaround. You can almost 90% of the times use those and it works. Outside of that, things get a little bit more specific. Let me see. So Pastor JJ says, how do you do runs with two hands, crossovers? So are you referring to stuff like, that? Arpeggios? Or if those are the runs you're talking about, those are arpeggios. And you can do them with one hand, or you can do them with two hands. You know, so all I'm doing, for example, if I'm running a C major 9, if I'm running a C major 9, you know, that's 6 2 4, that's 5 notes right there, but it's too big of a span for my hand. So it's easy. The easier way to do that is to split it between a hand. So I'll run that, so I'll do stuff like, or, see? So that's something they would do, you know, or you can do something like, so you take one of the note and put it in the left hand and you're just crossing over and hitting that note while running the other notes. You know? If I'm doing again this right here, major 9, just crossing over. But when you do it fast, you get that nice two-hand effect that you see the players doing. So that's just an arpeggio they're running. Great question. So a question, can you talk about modal mixing and how to play outside the key? So this is a great question, but it's a very big topic, you know? It's too complex to explain. And, you know, we have 112 people right now on live of various skill level, you know? So, I mean, I would need to go back to beginner to explain the concept of modal mixture. Then I would need some examples of usage of modal mixtures for you to wrap your head around, because it's not one of those blanket concept that I can just explain in 2 minutes. It's a little bit more complex. I think I've done a tutorial on modal mixture. Let me just do a quick search. Let me see, YouTube, and see if I have a tutorial on it. I think I did, but I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't really have a tutorial on modal mixing. Oh, so I guess that's a good topic to think about. That's a good topic to create a tutorial on. but it's one of those things that it's too much. It's too big of a concept to explain on a live stream. It will dedicate the rest of the live stream to this. So Sam says, improvisation. Please play a 1-5-6-4 progression and make it sound interesting. So there are a couple ways of making that sound interesting. Because remember that we have two schools of gospel that we talk about. You know, we talk about modern gospel and then we talk about old school gospel. So I'm going to give you the style of both. If I'm playing a more CCM style of a 1-5-4-6 progression, key of C, 1, 5, 6, 4. 1, 5, 6. So that's just me flooring around in a more sort of CCM style with some modern twist. If I'm doing a more old schooly bluesy style, a 1, let me see, what's the progression again? 1, 5, 6, 4. So that's an idea of how you can take a 1-5-6-4 progression, make it sound fun. Okay, question from New Creature in Jesus Christ. It says, how does ear training work? Let me see if I can narrow this down. Ear training is about oral memory and recognition. That's what ear training is. If you take a 2-year-old boy, they probably can't tell you the sound of more than, say, 2 or 3 different animals. A 2-year-old probably most likely would have been only exposed to, I'm talking about like a suburban 2-year-old now, or, you know, a dog and a cat's probably the only animal they've been exposed to. You know, so if they hear a sound of a dog or of a cat without seeing it, the 2-year-old would be like, oh, that's a dog or that's a cat. That's because they have been seeing and hearing what a cat or a dog sounds like. Take them out to the woods now, I don't know, or to a zoo, they probably can't tell you what a monkey sounds like, or a bear, or something more obscure. I don't know, a cheetah, a lion. As you grow more older as an adult and you start to see these animals on TVs and go to the zoo and see these animals, you can start to associate the name of this animal with what they look like and what they sound like. You're developing that oral memory to be able to associate a certain sound with an animal. And that's what ear training is. Now for guys who are car and bike enthusiasts, I know guys who can tell you the sound of all sorts of different car engine by sound. They can be in the house and they hear a certain car and it can be like, that's a 1980 blah 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 car, and I'm like, what? How do you even know that? Because these guys have invested hours, years of their life studying motorcycles and studying cars, and so they get familiar with the sounds of the engine. Same thing for wildlife experts, guys who spend years studying wildlife. They can tell you, like my dad, for example, grew up in the country of Jamaica, did a lot of hunting and just live in the woods. He can tell you the sound of like 20 different birds. He can be like, oop, that's that kind of bird, right? I'm like, all I hear is a bird making a sound. I know it's a bird, I don't know what kind it is. But he can tell you the name of the bird. At the heart of ear training, that's what ear training is. It's about studying something to the point where your oral memory can recognize the sound and tell what it is. For example, whenever I hear a dominant seventh chord, I just know it's a dominant seventh chord because I spent years playing dominant seventh chord and studying the sound of dominant seventh chords. Whenever a song moved from a 1 to a 4, I can hear that the progression was 1 to a 4 because I've spent time practicing and studying. That's what ear training is at the heart. It's about studying something so you can start associate sound with what it looks like or what it sounds like. Now there are different tips and technique how to gradually develop your ear, grow your ear to that level. Because the wildlife expert that can tell you the sound of 25 different birds didn't just start doing that overnight. They first has to study the sound of one particular bird till they get used to that, then a second, then a third, and over time, that's how they build up the amount of birds that they just know what they sound like. So there are a lot of different chord progressions and chord voicings. You can't just jump in and try to memorize all of them. You have to start from the beginning. Start learning how to identify just different intervals. Major 6, major 3rd, perfect 4th, tritone. And from there start identify, is a chord major, or is it minor, or is it diminished, or is it augmented, or is it a suspended 4, And again, I have courses that walk you through all of this stuff so that you're learning stuff in a manageable way, yeah? So that's how ear training works. There's no magic to it. I guarantee it's just, you gotta sit and devote time to learning this stuff. Okay. Let's see. Question. So remember, guys, so I can easily catch your questions, write big and bold question before you ask a question. So I don't have to try to read each comment to see if it's a question. Because all I'm doing now, I'm just skimming through, and when I see the word question, I stop and I will read that one. So, Ronnie, you're posting a lot of the same question in the chat. So try to avoid doing that. Just post one question. You don't have to spam the entire question. All right? Just post it once. And I'm seeing a lot of the same questions multiple times. Is it that I keep scrolling up or something? Simon says, how to increase finger speed and practice runs. I can easily play slower songs, but faster songs are difficult. So, Ronnie, I answered a similar question to this earlier. It's technique building. Scales, arpeggios, broken chords, blocked chords, practicing octave, chromatic scales. These are exercises you should be practicing daily to build your technique and your speed. Now, as it relates to building speed specifically, you should be monitoring your scales. So you should have like a notepad that you say, okay, today's Monday or today's Wednesday, July 1st. So I'm going to start practicing my scales, my major scales at metronome 60 beats per minute. Then you can come back 2 weeks later and say, now I'm going to increase my metronome speed to 65 beats per minute. And each week or 2 weeks, you gradually increase that till you get to the point where you can play your scales at 100 beats per minute. Then 110 beats per minute. And that's how you gradually increase your speed over weeks and months. Same thing goes for arpeggios. Same thing goes for broken chords and block chords. You start slow and you monitor yourself over the course of weeks and months and gradually increase the speed. And that's how you increase speed. Now, if there's a fast song you want to be able to play, first, slow down the speed of that song. So once you learn the chords, start practicing the song as slow as possible so you can play it comfortably and gradually increase the speed over time till you can play the same song fast. Like if I'm practicing some shout piano licks, we know that shout piano is fast. I don't practice it at the actual speed. I might slow the speed down of my practicing for like 70%. And then I gradually increase the speed till I can play that same lick at the actual tempo. So that's how you gradually learn how to play fast songs. You can't practice it at the actual speed. You have to slow it down 70, 80% slower. And then take as long as you need. 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 months to gradually increase the speed. All right, guys, I have 9 more minutes before we end the live stream. So someone asked, how can I use diminished chord, resolve it to the 6? So the best way to use diminished chord is in what we call the minor, the chromatic diminished movement. Diminished chords, 9 times out of 10, like to resolve to a minor chord. So if you're going from from C major to A minor, you can approach that with a diminished passing. The best way is to use the diminished chord that's a half step lower than the resolution chord. So my resolution chord is A. I can go a half step and use this G sharp diminished or A flat diminished. So then you're gonna go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. See? I use that diminished chord as passing to get me to the 6. Someone says, 1 out of 10, how do one play minor scales in gospel? Again, flip that question. Don't ask how do you play minor scales in gospel, but ask, does the song require the use of minor scales? Remember, the song comes first, the theory comes after. So don't try to take the theory and paste it to a song. Take the song and see, is there a way I can add the theory that I'm learning to the song? Because once you start to approach music with the concept of how do I use this chord, how do I use seventh chords in my songs? How do I use 9 chords in my songs? How do I use the Locrian scales in my songs? Then you're implying that you can just take any concept and apply it to every song, which isn't necessarily correct. You have to ask your song, will it enhance the song if I add this newly learned concept? Not every concept works well with every song, right? Because then your playing sounds the same, the song sounds the same. You start playing CCM like gospel or gospel like CCM. You know, you have to think in terms of style and genre. Just like how, you know, you wouldn't use curry powder. And I'm talking for folks who like curry food. I like curry food, you know. But you wouldn't use curry powder on jerk chicken or curry powder on barbecue chicken. You know, you wouldn't use curry powder on your rack of ribs that you have cooking in the steamer. And so when you talk about trying to just add passing chords or add all these exotic scales, it's like trying to add curry powder to everything, you know, or hot sauce to everything. I know people who do that. Ew, gross. They add sauce to literally everything they eat. Like, Jesus, everything doesn't need hot sauce. And that's the same way I feel when I hear people just using the same concept on every living song they play. It's like, nah, you have to ask yourself, does the song require the use of this? I don't use tritone in every song. You know what I'm saying? I don't use extended chords in every songs because it doesn't call for it. You know, it doesn't call for it. So, you know, and that's one of the things when you get to the advanced level, that's one of the things you have to learn is restraint. I have a lot of theory knowledge, a lot of stuff I know about chords and scales and concepts, but I have to exercise restraint when I'm playing in church, when I'm playing for a singer, to not try to overcrowd the song with everything I know. That's part of being a professional musician, exercising restraint. Just do what is necessary to enhance the song, to enhance the singer. That should be how you start thinking about music. Not just, I'm going to vomit everything I know into this song because it's going to sound good. No, it makes you look like a show off, and it so oftentimes ruin the song. All right? Don't be that guy. I'm seeing so much of the same questions. Or I'm just going to scroll down to where I see question. So Anya says, I am a 12-year-old and I want to know how to widen up my hands to play some chords. What should I do? Well, at 12, you still have a lot of growth and development that will take place. Your hands will naturally widen over time. All right, so don't force it too much. But one of the exercises you can do starting from now that will help is what I call the spider walk exercise built on diminished seventh chords. So, and this is a great way to build independence in the fingers. This is it actually. So do this. I call it the spider walk. So, then you go up. Then You can do it with two hands. And that's a great way to build independence within the finger, but also to get your fingers, because it really puts stretch between these fingers. But this is a very crucial exercise. You don't want to overdo it. So I would say to spend like a minute tops doing that and then done for the day, because you're stretching tendons. And if you overdo those, you can develop all kind of strange tendonitis or just finger issues. So do it lightly. And that's a great way to eventually start stretching your hands. Another way is to just start practicing octaves. And these are some good exercises you can practice. But again, at the age of 12, you still have a lot of growth to do in terms of just natural development. So it's good that you're thinking about these things from now, but allow yourself to grow, yeah? Someone asked, should I play advanced passing chords for singers who are not professionals? So, John, that's a question John asked. Should I play advanced passing chords for singers who are not professionals? Now, it shouldn't be about what the singer can do. It shouldn't be about the singer's ability. Your job as the pianist is to make the singer sound good. Period. So you do whatever you need to do to make that happen. I use advanced chords when playing for non-professional singers because it's not about the chord, it's about the usage. So if your usage of advanced chords is throwing off the singer, then the problem is with you. You're not using the chord correctly. You're not using good voicing, or you're not using it in a way that complements the song. Right? So again, remember, the role as an accompanist, the role as the pianist when accompanying is to make the singer, the congregation, the choir sounds good. And anything you're doing that detracts away from them being able to do their job, to sing confidently, then you're the problem. And so it's not about should I use advanced chords when playing for non-professional singer. It's are your usage of the chords preventing the singer from being able to sing the song confidently? If that's the case, then you need to fix you. That's what I'm going to say. Okay, I'm going to take two more questions, and unfortunately we have to close out. Question from Charles. He says, would you consider doing a tutorial on setting up advanced keys? I am using it, but it still doesn't sound right in my new studio monitors. So Charles, there are many different types of keyboards out there and many different ways to set up the keyboard. So I'm not sure what you mean. I don't know what kind of keyboard you have, what kind of studio setup you have. I don't know if you're using soft synths like virtual piano, or if you're using the built-in piano sound running it to your computer. So there's so many variables that it's hard to solve your question without specifics, right? So because I'm not sure what goal you're trying to achieve when you say it doesn't sound right. So Harry Bell, you say, can you play drop 2 voicing in C major? Trying to understand when do you apply drop 2 voicing in a song. Harry, I did a great collaboration with Corey Henry from Skilled Musician a few months ago on drop 2 voicing. That's the tutorial you want to check out, because we went in quite a bit of a detail as to how to use drop 2 and all of that. And we did a lot of the demonstration in the key of C. So that would be a better tutorial for you to watch, opposed to me trying to explain that in a live stream that I'm about to wrap up. So New Creature in Jesus Christ says, how do you train your ear? And I would say check out my ear training tutorials. Right here on YouTube, I have some ear training tips tutorial. Just type in the search bar, ear training Warren, or ear training piano lesson with Warren, and you'll see some interesting tips that come up. Question from Chris. He says, how does guide note work? Well, I'm not really sure what you call guide note. I'm not really sure of that terminology, unfortunately. Jonathan says, bro, I've been playing for a long time, but still not sounding gospel. I don't do runs and not big chords. My basic in music wasn't good. So, Jonathan, I would say just go back and start from the ground up. It's not that you're going to forget everything you've learned, but what I'm hearing is that you need some help with technique. You definitely need some help with theory, and you need some help with chords and their applications. You probably also need to start learning more songs. Again, these are all of the things I can help you with over at Piano Lesson with Warren, because this is not something that can be solved with just one thing. You need multiple things to be working on. You need structure, you need guidance, especially to probably break some bad habits you've developed. So this is not just a simple solution. We got some work to do, and you have to be ready to invest in doing that work, right? So we can move you from point A to point B. All right, so I did say I'm going to take 2 more questions. Let me take 1 more question. I'm scrolling the chat for one last question. I'm also see a lot of the questions that I'm skipping over is because I've answered them before in the chat. So for those of you who came on the live late, I would say once we close out, try to rewatch, because you'll see your question answer. Because I'm seeing a lot of the same questions coming up, so it doesn't make sense to answer the same question twice. Question from Bernice says, do you find a key to a song in the chorus? I'm not sure I understand that question. Oh, I think I do actually. You're asking where's the best place of the song to find the key? As soon as the song starts. You can't wait until the chorus before you find the key. As soon as the song starts, you want to be able to find the key within seconds, 10 to 15 seconds. I have a course, and I also have a video here on YouTube that gives you some tips as to how to find the key, because there's a method to it that works. Okay. Unfortunately, guys, that's all I have for today. All right? I want to thank you for hanging out with me this week. It was definitely fun. You guys brought a lot of questions, a lot of good questions. I see we still have, how many people online right now? I see we still have 113 people. And 104 likes and 1 thumb down. So somebody, I guess, didn't like probably how I answered their questions. So they gave me a thumb down. I don't know. But thank you guys. It's always a pleasure hanging with you guys. I wish I could have stayed longer, but I've been online now for an hour and a half. And hope that the questions that I answered really solve a lot of your problems, you know. And let me say this to close. Based on just the questions that I see coming up, a lot of you guys are trying to jump the ranks, to jump the ranking in climbing a musical ladder. There is no shame in being a beginner. Everybody starts at being a beginner. So there's no shame in trying to jump the ranks. You know, and see, if you're trying to jump to rank 6 when you haven't gone through rank 2 yet, then rank 6 is going to bring just more frustration, complications, and stress to you. Because things are built in layers. Before you can understand the layer 6, you got to understand the layer 3. So I want you guys to take the time and try to learn things in order, in sequential order. That's the only way you're going to start to learn certain concepts. I know the flashy stuff seems cool to you guys when you see me using all these runs and licks and lines and passing chords. Who don't want to do that? Everybody wants to do that. Of course, it's cool. I remember the days when I used to watch guys do that stuff and just drool like, man, I wish I could do that. But here I am at the level now where I can do that stuff. But I had to put in years of work to get to this level. You can't just skip stuff, you know? And so when someone say, how do you do these licks and lines and runs? It's not just random. It's crafted. I know exactly what I'm doing, you know? When I'm using all these passing chords and reharmonization, I know what I'm doing. But to get to that level, you first have to understand the path to get to that level. The usage of chords, the uses of harmony, the uses of scales, right? It's a process. And you guys, until you get ready to make the investment in putting in the step-by-step guidance and work, you're going to continue to spin your wheel. So I'm saying this, for those of you guys who haven't downloaded the free practice template, do that right now. I'm pulling it up right now. Because in there, I shed a lot of tips onto creating a structure. You need structure if you're going to see progress. Else you're going to find yourself sitting down practicing the same thing every day. You need structure. You need to be able to monitor your progress. All of those things. I know a lot of you guys are doing this piano learning thing on your own. But if in any way you're able to seek some professional help in the form of tutoring, it's an investment you will not regret. Trust me. It's going to save you years of stress and hard work if you invest in some guidance. Invest in a local tutor in your community or invest in the online program that I offer. I really do try to give as much help as I can in these programs to help you and guide you. But remember that being a good pianist, being a good musician, has to become a lifestyle process for you. It's not something that you're just going to be able to accomplish in 3 months. It's got to be something you're ready to hang in there for the long haul. I've been studying music consistently for 17 years. Day in, day out. Music is what I eat, sleep, dream, and breathe. You know, so when you see me sit and play, it's something I've been working on for, you know, almost 20 years. And I still continue to work at it. I don't get as much time to practice as much as I'd love to anymore because I spend my days doing a lot of teaching right now. But for those of you who want to make progress, you got to be absolutely hungry and serious to invest the time seek some help, put in the time, learn things in a structured manner. And I guarantee you, in a few years, it's not going to take as long as you think. In a few years, you will see a night and day difference in your playing. But you got to get off the road of the quick win, the quick fixes, trying to skip the work. If you're not practicing, start doing some practicing, get some structure. So I'm posting right now in the chat the link for my practice templates, free download. From there, you'll get some idea as to what I need to be working on and focusing on. Technique, ear training, progressions, which involve chords and all of that, which involves theory. Ear training, theory, technique, progressions, and lastly, repertoire. You got to be learning songs. Remember, at the end of the day, learning music in the piano is about so we can sit at the piano and play songs. So I always say, whether you're beginner, intermediate, or advanced, you need to be learning at least one song each day. I know hundreds of songs, but I didn't just learn them all in a week or month. No, hundreds of songs over the course of 17 years. So you need to be learning songs regularly, learning songs in their original key. That's when you're going to start to see the pattern. That's when you're going to start to hear the pattern. That's when you're going to start to see the connections. But if you just started this thing 6 months ago and you only know how to play 2 songs, that's the tip of the iceberg. When you learn 30 songs, that's when you're going to start to go, okay, now I understand what's going on. And so, if you're not working your way through songs, start doing all that stuff. All right? So that's it. Rant over. All right? So thanks again, guys, for coming out, for jumping online with me. Love you guys. Continue to listen, continue to sing, and continue to practice, because this is how we become a good musician. All right? So you all stay safe from COVID. Stay safe from any form of riots and all of that good stuff. Just stay safe. Love you guys. And I will catch you next week when I'll resume my usual upload of tutorials. Cool? All right. Bye for now. And thanks for joining me here.